Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Today we're out in the garden on this beautiful morning that is about to turn into a really hot day. So we're just going to take a little walk around the garden, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be harvested. So we're just going to harvest what we need for the day. And so I thought you might like to join me and just get a little mini tour of how the garden's doing, and we'll harvest some delicious fresh food. So the first thing we're going to harvest is this cauliflower head here. I actually meant to harvest this yesterday, but I didn't get to it yet. You can see there's another one over here, kind of covered by all these leaves. I'm blanching it to protect that from the sun. That one's kind of small. That one's not quite ready yet. We're going to give that one a couple more days, but we're going to go ahead and harvest this one. All right, so I've got my harvesting knife here, and this is going to be a little challenging to do with one hand, but I'm going to see if I can do it. I'm just going to kind of cut the head at an angle. You don't need to be as gentle with the cauliflower plant because unlike broccoli, you only get one harvest from this and then it's done. So I can go ahead and pull this plant out now. It's not going to give me any more cauliflower, and then I can use this space to replant something else. So there's our first harvest. While we're in this brassica bed here, I'm going to go ahead and harvest a bunch of these kale leaves too. You can see I have a lot of kale growing here in a pretty small space, and I'm going to thin it out a little bit and give it a little more space. So you can see, let me try to move this insect netting here. I've got a few different kinds of kale in here. So I'm going to take a few leaves from each one. So to harvest the kale leaves, I usually just kind of snip them off at the base with scissors. Just grab those. All of this is going to be a little bit awkward with one hand here. But so this is our blue curled Scotch kale. That looks nice and beautiful. There's my harvest bowl. I'm thinking it may not be quite large enough because we're harvesting some bigger items today. Grab this leaf here. So we're going to turn this kale we're going to turn some of it into kale powder. And all right, see, some of these leaves aren't looking very good. I should have harvested some of these sooner, but we're going to harvest the ones that are looking good like this so that we can get them preserved while they're still in their best state. So once we get a nice harvest of kale, this is dazzling blue lacinato kale, also known as dinosaur kale. And oh my goodness, that is not cool. Look what I just found. I think this guy is going to become a little chicken snack. So once I get a nice pile of this kale harvested, we're going to turn some of this into kale powder. And kale powder is great because you can use it all through the winter. You can mix it right into smoothies. No one will even be able to know. You can mix it into meatballs. You can mix it into just all kinds of things where you want like a little extra dose of veggies, a little extra dose of greens. It's great in meatballs. It's great in meatloaf. So we're going to do that with about half the kale we harvest, and then the other half we're going to freeze. Once it's frozen, you can crumble it really nicely just into soups and stews and things like that all winter long. So you'll probably notice that I was harvesting from the lower leaves of the kale. You can see I missed one here, so I'm going to go ahead and harvest this one also. But when you harvest kale, you want to harvest from the bottom leaves of the plant, because if you leave the top and the middle part here, that's going to regrow and allow you to get a continuous kale harvest all season long. And can we just take a minute to appreciate the beauty of this dazzling blue kale? You can see it's got these beautiful purple ribs, purplish stem, and then it's got these deep green crinkled leaves. I think this is just such a beautiful plant. You could grow it in an ornamental garden and no one would ever know that it wasn't supposed to be beautiful. And while we're on the topic of beautiful plants, look at this Savoy cabbage here. It's starting to get a little head in there. I think I've still got a ways to go with that one, but this one is so beautiful too. Let's take a look at our other cabbages while we're over here. Okay, this one's early Jersey Wakefield, and this one's getting a pretty solid head. So I don't think it'll be too long till it's time to harvest this one. Maybe a little bit longer because it's still on the small side, but that's feeling pretty solid. So I think that'll be soon. This one here looks like it's still got a little ways to go, but it's catching up. Okay, so it's starting to get pretty toasty out. You can see that we have a really generous bunch of kale here. And we also have our cauliflower taking up half our bowl. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this kale into my kitchen. I'm gonna leave it on the kitchen counter so that we have room in our bowl to harvest more things and so that the sun doesn't start to wilt it. I'm going to take the leaves off of this cauliflower, plus that little green caterpillar that we found. I'm gonna give those to my chickens for a treat. I'll be right back. So here we have some calendula flowers. These I just kind of pinch off with my fingers. You wanna harvest these pretty much in the morning right after they open. You can feel the resin on them, they're a little bit sticky. We're gonna take these inside and we're going to dry them for a couple different uses. Over here we have some yellow calendula. Looks like this one probably actually opened yesterday, so I should have harvested that a day ago. But we're gonna go ahead and pop it into our basket anyway. This is actually the same variety. It comes in both orange and yellow. It's called Resina. I'm gonna fix our cauliflower there. It just bothers me being upside down. But this calendula variety is called Resina, and I like it because it is supposed to be one of the highest. It's supposed to have some of the highest content of some of those essential oils and resins that calendula is known for that really give it its medicinal properties. So I like that one. And when you grow it, some of the flowers come out yellow and some of them come out orange. Either way, I think they're both beautiful. One more little calendula flower over here. I'm gonna add that to the bowl. Down in here, you can see we have our first zucchini ready to harvest. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my kitchen scissors. You could also use a sharp knife. I'm just going to cut that stalk down there and we're gonna bring this in. This one's nice and small, so it's gonna be nice and tender. You can let them get a little bit bigger if you're planning on grating them for zucchini bread. They start to lose some of their tenderness and deliciousness when they get too big though, so you wanna harvest them usually while they're pretty small. There we go. It's our first zucchini of this summer. While we're over here, take a look at this little tiny cucumber baby. I'm guessing, you know, my cucumber seedlings got mixed up, but this is probably a China jade cucumber, I'm guessing, based on how long this little fruit is. This just bloomed yesterday, so I think that this variety actually grows even without pollination. So this should develop whether or not it was pollinated. So in here, you can see that we have lots of these red swan bush beans. Bush beans, really. I mean, they're pretty ambitious climbers for bush beans. But we're gonna go ahead and harvest a bunch of these today. These should make a nice side dish for dinner today. I just kind of grab the stem with my fingers and then snap it off with my other fingers. And there you go. These beans are so pretty. Now you can see this one's starting to have a little bit of you can see kind of the definition of where the seeds are. This probably actually ideally would have been harvested yesterday, but this will still be delicious. So I'm just gonna get a handful of these, and then probably what I'll do is saute these with a little bit of olive oil and butter. I like to use a combination of olive oil and butter because the olive oil allows you to cook at a higher temperature, and the butter, of course, gives you all of that delicious flavor. So I use a little bit of both. I like to sliver a little bit of garlic, let it sit in the olive oil and butter on low temperature for a while, just to really infuse that garlic flavor throughout all the butter and oil. Then I add the beans, a little bit of salt and pepper, saute just until they're crisp tender. I don't like them to be overdone and mushy, but it's a delicious and easy side dish. You can see here some of my other beans aren't doing as well as the red swan, but I've got some other beans ready to harvest too. This is a provider green bean. Now when it comes to plants like peas and beans, you want to make sure that you keep them well picked, because once these pods reach maturity, that's a signal to the plant that it's done its job, it's created seeds. Now it can just focus on seeds and it doesn't have to keep trying to create more. So you're going to get more of a harvest if you pick these young and you pick them often. So if you happen to see a bean or a pea or two that got away from you and they're too tough to really enjoy anymore, go ahead and pick them anyway and just compost them, unless your goal is to save seeds, in which case let them finish maturing and go to seed. But if your goal is to get as many fresh beans as possible, then go ahead and pick young and pick often. Now you can see that my Vortex green beans are doing really well. These beans are long and these should be deliciously tender. This is going to be my very first harvest of these. We have been harvesting the bush beans for a little while, but we haven't had any pole beans yet. So I'm gonna harvest these the same way. I just kind of pinch them and pull them down. So the same principle applies with pole beans as with bush beans. You want to keep them picked so that they don't think that they're finished with their job and stop producing more delicious beans for you. So here's another one that looks good. Now, when it comes to cooking beans of different sizes together, you can see that these are at least twice the length of my bush beans, maybe even longer. I'm just going to cut these up a little bit so that they're about the same size as my bush beans and saute them together. It'll just make it a little easier to eat and cook evenly. I'm looking, I see a lot more beans that are gonna be ready in a few days. Don't know if we have any more that are ready now. I think that's it for today. So we're just going to go ahead and add these few beans to our basket. Pretty soon we'll be overrun with beans between our bush beans and our pole beans. Now you can see I have rattlesnake pole beans here. These are just starting. These are little tiny beans, but let's see how pretty those are with their green beans and their purple streaks. These are a little bit of a later maturing variety than the others. Over here are my purple pole beans. These will also be a little bit behind the Vortex. That's a really early variety. So these are gonna have a little ways to go. But it won't be too long. Probably really just a couple days before we start harvesting these also. Now we're really just getting started with our tomato harvest, but you can see I've got a few cherry tomatoes here. I've just been getting a few cherry tomatoes every day. We've got another one back here that's ready. And we've just kind of, so far, just been snacking on these or adding them to salads. We don't have enough to really do anything else with, but they are delicious, so we enjoy every one that we get. Now these are Matt's Wild Cherry tomatoes. These delicious little tomatoes have a pretty thin skin, which makes them delicious, but they tend to tear pretty easily when I harvest them. Rather than pull them fully off of the stem, I usually just detach them right here. You can see there's a little bit of an elbow right here. I just kind of snap them there and pull them off that way. That way I can easily and delicately pull these off in the house so that the skin doesn't tear. Now these little black opal tomatoes here are going to be the very first that we've ever had of this variety. These are not fully ripe. These probably need another day or two, but we are supposed to get thunderstorms over the next couple days. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest these a little bit early. I'm going to let them finish ripening in the house because if they get a sudden heavy amount of rain, then they're likely to split. So we're going to bring them in the house and let them finish ripening in there. These beautiful tomatoes here are not ripe yet. You can see they've developed a really beautiful color, that nice purple color on top. That's not a sign of ripeness though. That's just the anthocyanins in the skin reacting with the sun and developing. You can see on the bottom they're still green. So when it comes to purple, well, when it comes to black tomatoes, purple tomatoes are actually a little different. But when it comes to black tomatoes like these, or blue tomatoes, you want to judge the ripeness based on the color at the bottom of the tomato. All right, and look over here. I'm gonna see if I can bring you in close enough to really see that. This isn't ready to pick yet, but my first black strawberry tomato is starting to blush. So it's going to be really soon we can eat that. That's going to be delicious. I can't wait for that. I've never tried this variety before, so this will be the very first one. Now we're actually going to do a little bit of a different type of harvest. Do you see this scallion blossom here that has gone to seed? If I kind of hold this in my hand, look at all these black seeds come out. So we're going to harvest a few different types of seeds from the garden because I'm trying to get a little more serious about seed saving this year. So the first type we're going to harvest is these scallions here. So all of the seeds that I'm going to be harvesting today look pretty distinct from each other, and I'm familiar with all of them, so I'm going to be able to tell by sight which one is which. So I'm just not going to worry about labeling them until I get back into the house. But if you're not sure, you would definitely want to label them as you go. So you can see we've gotten some seeds. We've also gotten a little bit of debris. So I'm just going to kind of pick through that. Sometimes you can even give it a really light blow because these little pieces of debris are lighter than the seeds. So as long as you don't blow hard enough to blow the seeds away, you can kind of blow the debris away that way sometimes. So I usually scatter some of the scallion seeds directly in the garden bed to try to expand my scallion patch a little bit. And I store some in a baggie just in case. You never know what might go wrong. If my scallions somehow die one year, or if I just decide I want scallions in another place, it's great to have these seeds. I'm going to try to drop these in the bag. I'm probably going to end up spilling half of them in the garden bed, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. Yep. So as predicted, we got about half of them. I'm just going to harvest a little more of these, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So you just want to wait until the seed heads are really dried out. Like this here, you can see it's very dry. It's not green anymore. And you want to wait until the seeds are black. If you harvest them before that point, they're not going to be viable and most likely won't sprout for you. So when you store your seeds in a baggie like this, you also want to make sure that there is no soil with them, and you want to make sure there's no moisture. The reason for no soil is because soil usually will have trace amounts of moisture, even if it seems dry. And if your seeds are stored with wetness, they will either sprout prematurely and then die, or else they'll rot. So you want to store your seeds definitely in a cool, dark, dry place for the longest shelf life. So the next type of seed that we're going to harvest is kale. I'm going to bring a ripe seed pod over so that you can see it. Now when your seed pod is dry like this, you can see it's kind of light colored, it's dried out. You can see the seeds inside are dark. You should be able to crack it open. You should be able to just crack it open like that, and the seeds come out. And the seeds should be brown like this. You don't want to harvest if they're green or white. You want them to either brown or black, because that's a sign that they're mature and they'll be ready to sprout. Now, you'll notice here, I'm going to put these in the bag. You'll notice that I was harvesting from these exposed seed pods, not the ones that I bagged to prevent cross-pollination. So these that I bagged are not quite ready yet. So harvesting from these could potentially be a mix of a few different kinds of kale. So we're just going to save these and we're going to see what we get. Now this one I might have harvested too early. Let's crack it open and see. See those seeds there? That actually looks good. So we're going to take these seeds. We're going to add these to our bag. We're going to crack open the other side. I'm dropping a few seeds here, so we may get some volunteer kales next year, but that's okay. So I'm just going to go through and grab a few more seeds from some of these seed heads that are dried out here. You can see that some of these already scattered their seeds in the garden. Some of these are already opened up before we got to them. So you can see just a few kale seeds, not too many, but we'll keep coming back and check for new ones to be ready. So in this broccoli bed here, you can see that I've harvested all the main heads already, but there's some little side shoots like this that are ready to be harvested. So I'm just going to go through here. You can see I missed this one. This one started flowering, but I'm just going to go through and use my kitchen scissors. I'm going to snip off these little side shoots here and gather those. And I think those I'm going to eat for lunch today. So the last kind of seed that we're going to harvest today are lettuce seeds. If you saw my last garden tour, you saw that this lettuce plant has gone to seed, and you heard me talk about all the reasons why I want to save seed from this plant. I'm going to link that garden tour below, so check it out if you missed it. But you see this little one in here that almost looks like a tiny fluffy dandelion? This is how lettuce makes its seeds. So I'm going to pull that out and show you what the seeds look like. So let's carefully pull this off so I can do this without losing the seeds. See this little ball of fluff here? If I take this fluff and just kind of pull it out, it is very similar to dandelion. Let me just drop these into my hand because I'm going to lose them otherwise. But see these little seeds here? So these come attached to these little white pieces of fluff, kind of like a dandelion seed. So we're going to save these seeds because this was a lettuce plant that I liked a lot and I want to keep going in my garden. Right now I only have a few. I definitely want more than this. So I'm going to come out and harvest some more until I get a pretty good collection. Then I'm going to let this lettuce plant scatter the rest of its seeds throughout the garden, so we hopefully get some volunteer lettuce. All right, we've got one more thing to harvest today, and that is these delicious raspberries. So I want to harvest the ones that are nice and plump and juicy and red, and they'll detach really easily when they're ready. So this one looks perfect. Okay, so we've got a whole big bowl of delicious ripe red raspberries. I can't wait to eat these. And this is one of my favorite things to grow because we've been getting a bowl of raspberries like this every day for the last few days. And it's gonna continue on that way for a little while. And then we'll get a second harvest later in the fall. So really, you can't go wrong growing red raspberries. Now these are our raspberries that are not quite perfect. So we're gonna go over and see the chickens and make them very happy. You can see we have an audience. These girls love when I pick raspberries because whenever we get one that's kind of partly eaten by bugs or overripe or just not that great, they get it and it's great to them. They love it. So they're waiting for a little treat from me. All right, girls, that's it for today. Now we also over in the backyard have these blush raspberries, which are really pretty. They're kind of like a corally pink color. So we get a few of these every day. These berry bushes are newer, so we don't get as many every day. And honestly, these are kind of the favorite, so a lot of these get eaten right out in the yard. But I am going to harvest a few of these. You can probably hear in the background that my girls followed me over here because they know exactly what I'm doing, and I think they saw that I have these. So I'm just going to finish picking these blush double gold raspberries. We'll probably only get a few of these. The chickens are hoping that there will be a few imperfect ones for them too. So I'm just going to pick them and I'll meet you back here. So we got a lot of harvesting done today. Thank you for hanging out with me in my garden and collecting all of this. You can see we got this big bunch of kale. I actually harvested a lot of garlic today too. That's going to be a separate video, but we got a lot of harvesting done today. We've got this big, beautiful bowl of vegetables. Plus we got our bowl of raspberries and we got a few little packets of seeds. So lots of delicious food to enjoy. So I'm going to put preserving this kale in a separate video. That'll probably be the next video, or either way, it'll be really soon. So I hope that you'll check out that video and see how we turn this kale into a powder. And I'm going to freeze some of it too. Freezing, it's a pretty simple process, but I'll put it in the video anyway. So I hope that you'll come back and check that out. Thank you so much for taking the time to walk through my garden with me, to harvest with me, and just to spend time with me today on this toasty morning that's going to turn into a really hot afternoon. So I hope that you are having a great day. I hope that your gardens are doing well, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. Bye.